Welcome to Ken's Corner Podcast, Season 4.
Hi, everyone. This is Ken from Ken's Corner. And today I have Nick Smalls. Thank you so much for coming, Nick. Nick does all my Argo talks. So we're going to do a recap of 2024, this exciting season. I mean, we called for the Argos to go there last year. Unfortunately, that 16-2 team did not make it. We made so many different changes, even through that season. But here we are, Nick. Here we are, and it was an exciting season. Let's start with the Chad Kelly dilemma at the start of the year, and when he did come back, just everything around it, the cloud that was around it, and your thoughts on what you were feeling about Chad Kelly, and then just what happened from there. Let's start with early season, Nick.
Yeah, so of course when the Chad Kelly incident broke out, it was not a good look for the team. It was not a good look for the league coming out of it because of course Chad Kelly was set to be the face of the franchise and one of the faces of the league. But as we saw, the team quickly made their ways to pivot around it, and one of the big things that they did in that offseason was signing Nick Arbuckle right before camp. And I was fortunate enough to go to the beginning of training camp, the double blue game, and the game against the Tiger Cats. And after the double blue game, Nick Arbuckle looked outstanding, to be frank, in it. And it was funny too, because Pinball was making his rounds chatting to fans like he does in training camp. And my dad said to him, like, Nick Arbuckle looked really good, and that was a good signing, given the situation. And I mean, Pinball just being himself grew a huge smile on his face and was happy to hear that. And of course, who would have thought, I know I'm jumping ahead, but who would have thought that this guy would end up having to fill in for Chad Kelly at the end of the season as well, ultimately winning MVP for the Grey Cup. For me, that was just such a picture perfect moment. But yeah, going out of the gate, things didn't look too great. They started off really hot with a big win at home against BC, but then it was kind of a little touch and go. Teams were starting to figure out Cameron Dukes out. Um, then they put Arbuckle in, and they managed to squeeze some wins out of there. So by the time Chad came back, they were able to get at a 5-4 record. And while I think compared to last year, with the expectations of repeating a 16-2 season not really being that likely, you kind of just you're glad that they're still at 500 at that point.
Yeah, 100%. Now let's talk about when Chad Kelly came back. Just the media chatter around the situation. Not everyone was happy to see him back, but uh, talk about the strength of Chad Kelly it took to go to do what he did and bring this team within that into that playoff game against Montreal. Like he had to have been a very, very strong minded person, and his reconciliation as well. I found was heartfelt, and I accepted it myself. What's your opinion on when Chad Kelly came back?
Yeah, I think there's going to be people who are going to write him off, and he's going to be labeled, criticized for what he did, the actions he did. Um, but yeah, there is some merit to proving that you've learned from it and you've moved on and you've tried to make yourself better as a person. And I know I myself, and I'm sure you do, and many of our listeners here, you sometimes can dwell on some of the bad things you've done, all in perspective of one another, and you try to better yourself from it. But when talking about the play on the field of play, like you see just how night and day, how different the team acts with when Chad Kelly's there versus when he's not. In those games that they won in the first 9 games, um, uh, you notice that even then they were only barely mustering 20, 25 points in some of those games. But then coming out when Chad Kelly came back in, a little rocky at the start, but they were putting up 30 plus points almost every single game. And it just seemed to really reignite the offense. And you saw how the team really rallied around behind him. And you saw that, of course, in the Montreal game when he went down. It's so easy with something like that happening, your starting quarterback, that a team just can kind of roll over and die. But they kept fighting in the same way as we saw with Ryan Dinwiddie's iconic quote at this point. And then, of course, they rallied together one more time at the Grey Cup and were able to defeat Winnipeg.
Yeah, that was amazing. You know what? I had an interview this season on my podcast with Adam Rita, and I stayed in contact with Adam straight through to the Grey Cup. Although, you know what, that Grey Cup day, I did not message Adam until I knew that we were actually, in fact, winning the Grey Cup. I didn't want to jinx it for him at all, and then him blame Ken Judge for that fact. But anyway, let's talk about some of these exciting players that we had in our lineup. Kadeem Carey. Let's talk about the impact of Kadeem Carey, Javon Grant, some of our defensive players that starred for us this season. Let's
Yeah.
give us
Oh,
some.
sorry.
Let's talk about these guys.
Yeah, by far. Well, we'll start with Kadeem Carey. And um, I know at the beginning of the season, everybody was a little disappointed or upset. They lost AJ Ouellette to Saskatchewan. They lost Javon Lee to Edmonton. But I honestly thought at the beginning of the year, the Kadeem Carey signing was one of the big things that was going to carry the Argonauts deep into into a playoff run. The thing is, last year, Kadeem Carey playing for Calgary did not have a very good season. He spent most of the season injured, but the year before, he was in the running for being the most outstanding player in the league. And clearly, he proved he still had a lot of energy left in the tank this year with Toronto. A little bit of intermittent issues with some back troubles, but maybe carrying the team too hard on his back at times. He looked outstanding throughout the season, especially in really key moments when they needed big gains. For example, when they played Ottawa in the first playoff game there, early in the second half, Chad Kelly had to miss some time, took a hit and was ruled out by the concussion spotter. Kadeem Carey received the ball like 3 or 4 straight times and was able to truck the ball 30 yards down the field on 4 carries, and then just in time for Chad to be eligible to come back and then put it away in the end zone. So that's one such example. Janarian Grant, of course, like you mentioned, another huge one. They signed after Winnipeg released them. Someone that Mickey Donovan, the special teams coordinator, was extremely high on signing and proved it when he had all those massive kick returns, whether it led to touchdowns or just good field position in general. Flipping to the defensive side of the ball, obviously the leader of that defense is Wynton McManis. He had an absolutely outstanding Grey Cup performance and was really the heart and soul and the leader of that defense all year long. And you could see, too, when they were having a little bit of those struggles at the beginning of the year, Wynton McManis missed some of those games, but when he was back at it, he was right there and leading the team all the way.
Yeah.
And then to just pick two other individuals that I want to talk about on the secondary as well. I really liked the way that Deshaun Amos and Royce Metier really held the secondary back together. It was a little touch and go at the beginning of the year, but then as other guys came in, we saw Benji Franklin step up. We saw Tavares McFadden, Robert Priester return. All of that just kind of brought them together to the next level. So they had and they stood up in that Grey Cup game to make some of the key interceptions that they needed to seal the game against Winnipeg in the Grey Cup.
100%. I appreciate that. I just want to throw out one more name for you to talk about for me. Dejon Brissett, the Mississauga boy. Let's talk about this guy.
Yeah, he comes right from my backyard, going to Loyola Secondary School. Absolutely great story for him to have the performance that he did. That I remember watching that catch, of course, at the game there at the Grey Cup, and yeah, it was just an outstanding athletic play because I mean it was good that Arbuckle was able to make that read, cheat everybody on the left side and then pitch it back out to him there. But also just the athletic ability to because it was a little bit behind him, and for him to be able to turn back and make such an outstanding catch, really clinched it for them. And then also, if we're talking Canadian wide receivers, got to give some credit to Kevin Mittal as well, who scored that opening uh, touchdown for the Argos, where he made that
Beautiful.
leap. Yeah, people are already comparing him to Nick Lewis, which, given the stellar career he had in Calgary, that's a very good name to be compared to.
Yeah, you got that right. Okay, we're gonna wrap up our regular season. Give me, I know there's so many highlights of the season, but if one could stand out for you, give us your highlight of the regular season.
Yeah, I think one of the ones I enjoyed overall in the regular season was the Saskatchewan game during the CNE. The
I was
crowds
there.
were the crowd. Yeah, same here. The crowd was amazing. The game was awesome. I remember it being close through the whole way through. You had the storyline with Corey Mace and the Riders, now head coach of the Riders, formerly defensive coordinator for the Argos, coming back. So you had a lot of former faces in. I enjoyed both the Edmonton games as well. The fact that you also had a lot of ex-Argonaut players going there. And I know this sounds weird because you think with them getting swept by Hamilton, I wouldn't enjoy that. But honestly, going to Hamilton on Labor Day weekend as the villains, you embrace being the antagonists there. It's honestly kind of a fun experience. So you kind of learn to embrace it when you've been to enough of those Labor Day games, whether it was previously at Ivor Wynn or now at the Donut Box in Tim Hortons Field.
Yeah, I kind of understand what you're saying. I've been to a couple of Toronto Maple Leaf games in Ottawa, so I understand it's really fun to do. Okay, so let's talk about Ottawa. We scored the most points an Argo team has ever scored in a playoff game, and we've been around since 1873. So 58 points in that playoff game. Let's talk. I know you were at that game. Give us your feelings on what went down in that game.
Yeah, what is really interesting about it is just like you said, how just a gunslinger battle it was. Chad Kelly looked awesome right out of the gate, and even when you compare it to Drew Brown, it's in Ottawa. It wasn't like Ottawa was necessarily struggling either to put up points. Ottawa ran a really interesting scheme for most of that game because they went empty backfield almost the entire game. They didn't really run a whole lot. They had Jalen Acklin in as running back, who's normally a wide receiver. So I think it kind of threw the Argonauts off guard, and Brown was able to make a lot of really good deep passes. But Toronto was also just able to respond so quickly because there were so many drives where Chad Kelly found Mackay Polk right up the middle for a 40, 50, 60-yard pass, just absolutely carving their secondary away. So it led to just this really energetic, high octane shootout, and fans were just seeing it up because like while I tend to be more of the strategic guys and I like seeing a lot of these low scoring battles of attrition, I think a lot of fans just love huge offensive productions, big numbers, lots of points being scored. And that's exactly what we got out of it. And most importantly, the Argonauts were able to seal a win to move on into the second round of the playoffs to get some vengeance against Montreal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. I pitted it as the revenge game myself. When I spoke to Jim Lang, he kind of tempered my expectations on that just a little bit. But he said, I'm certain that Argos do would like to extract some sort of revenge, but that's not all they're heading into this game to do. Let's talk about that big win and the moment Chad Kelly went down. Personally, I'd hate to say it. I was more comfortable with Nick Arbuckle in that game than I was Chad Kelly. Let's get your feelings on the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, Chad definitely did not look at his best in that game, and I don't know what it's always hard to tell based on the crowd influence and the noise. Certainly on TV, it sounded loud. I wasn't able to see the game in person, but yeah, with that amount of blowhorns and sort of maybe some a little bit of bad memories from how it went last year, we kind of saw it reflected in the very first offensive drive where on the second play, Chad did the little scramble and threw a really terrible ball, if we're going to be honest. But fortunately, there was that outstanding play by Polk again to knock the ball out of the returner. Um,
That was
that they were
amazing.
able to, yeah, that really saved them for them early in that game. But yeah, it wasn't really until late, right before halftime, where Chad was able to connect with DeMonte Coxey on a really key last second halftime touchdown, because at that point in time they could have walked away with nothing and not even gotten a chance to kick the field goal. So to take that risk, and more importantly for it to pay off, for them to, like, Montreal did everything right in that first half. They came out with a completely, unlike Ottawa, where they went almost nobody in the backfield. Montreal went really heavy, and they really worked the playbook on Toronto. And I thought outplayed them by far in the first half, but they ended up being down at halftime, and then they kind of went back to more vanilla, vanilla offense, which Toronto really was ready to capitalize on, more so um than the mixed bag of stuff they were pulling in the first half.
Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so let's have you were watching the game. Chad
Yeah.
Kelly goes on that run in the third quarter, and he gets, I don't know how many guys were on top of him. I must have been at least four. It turns out broken tibula. What was your feelings in that moment? Was it oh no?
Yeah, it was a little bit. I think there was still a little bit of belief in me that they would be able to hold on, but yeah, definitely at the moment when it happened, like as soon as they showed the other camera view, like when you see him try to walk, and you knew someone went down, like you knew, like the second I saw that, like I knew it was broken, and that would be it for his run. But what really was outstanding about it was at the end, the way that they were able to continue to fight and continue to close out that game. And really, like we saw in some other occasions, Nick Arbuckle really emerged as the hero in that game. On a key second down, was able to make a pass. I think it was to Brissett for the first down. And then there was the later on there, the pass to Unger, that the defensive back ran into him for the pass interference. That is what allowed them to score. And you've got to give a ton of credit to Ryan Dinwiddie there, because it's so easy in that situation, like we've seen in other circumstances earlier in the year. It's really easy to just run the ball twice and kill as much time as you can and punt. It takes a lot of courage and smart coaching to take the chance at throwing that ball down the field. And that's exactly what they needed to do. And it was those passes that Arbuckle was able to make under pressure, which allowed them to win that game.
Yeah, 100%. Again, I was overjoyed and over thrilled during that win. You, and on the other hand, had bought, and I'm sure many months before, your Grey Cup tickets, heading out there to Vancouver, BC. Tell me your feeling once you realized that your beloved Toronto Argonauts were in fact in the Grey Cup game.
Yeah, I was pearls clenched in that East final just for that reason. I There's something about when you go to one of these things, Grey Cup, like you said. I had my tickets back when they first went on sale in April, the season ticket holders, and I was going to this game no matter what. And yeah, when your hometown team has a shot to win the cup, it at the other side of the country, it's unbelievable. And I know from being there for the game, the players felt it, like they knew how many of us. There's probably at least a good 50, if not 100 of us that made the journey over to support the team no matter what. And I know for a fact that they were all appreciative after it, from beginning to end. The encouragement, the energy, the excitement. I mean, I know we might not have as many fans as some of the other teams, especially going out to Vancouver for a Grey Cup that far out. But it was definitely all hard, and the passions there equal, if not greater than any other team in the league.
Yeah. Let's talk about that game. Give us your run.
Oh, I keep telling people the way it was at halftime. If you know anything about Mr. Goalie Glenn Hall, is that he was notorious for being sick, before games, like in the locker room and during intermission. And I felt that exact way at halftime, because although the first half game plan, I think, worked exactly according to plan. They only gave up one big pass, and they were within arm's length of them at halftime. Like they were only down by a point, 10-9. Like you asked if at anybody if that was it at halftime, you'd be happy and absolutely be thrilled. But man, I was so nervous in that halftime, just by how close the game was, and because Winnipeg was playing a very pass-heavy game, they were look for the deep ball a lot in that first half. There's just that little bit of nerves. But then as the game started to turn in the third and into the fourth quarter, you started to see Toronto just manage to wear down a Winnipeg. And I mean, you had some unfortunate injuries. Obviously the big one was Zach Collaros cutting his hand. Like that was just such a fluke thing that you almost never see in football. So that was definitely a huge blow to Winnipeg's offense. And fortunately, like even when Toronto made mistakes, Arbuckle had that sack fumble, but they were able to recover. Then there was the block punt, and then by a fortunate ruling, by that interference, the Argos were able to retain possession.
Yeah.
And then the two interceptions. Like it was just the fact that Toronto was able to capitalize on the turnovers committed by Winnipeg, and Winnipeg simply wasn't able to capitalize on the ones that they got off on Toronto. That's what ultimately led to Toronto managing to pull out this game and getting the Grey Cup win.
Yeah. Let's talk about now the after game celebration. I'm sure you stayed right there inside that dome while they were getting that Grey Cup presented to them. What was your
Yeah.
feelings behind that?
Oh man, so we all gathered after we saw the presentation up. I was up right above the press box, in the first row of seats in the upper deck. Once they presented the trophy and everything, we wandered down and headed out to where all the other Argo fans were, kind of behind the Argos bench area. Um, and if you know who Adam Goss is, the PA announcer for the Argos, he was there, of course, and turns to me and the first thing he says is that. Sure looks like there's a lot more Argo fans now.
That's
So,
amazing.
yeah, we stayed basically till they kicked us out and all the players had already left the field. All the parents and close relatives, friends, they were going in off the opposite side of the field in what I guess was the northwest corner. We stayed in the southwest corner behind the Argos bench and we're cheering. And then, yeah, by the time like everything went and happened, it was almost still a little bit of disbelief. Like it took me a while to actually process that that actually happened and that they actually won. So yeah, we took it out on the town. We celebrated. Most of the other fans had already packed up the bars, but they had gone and left fairly quickly. Um, and then it left a lot of us Argos fans hanging around in the area around BC Place, having drinks and singing songs. And the Argos fight song was probably sung at least a dozen times after that game. It was an outstanding experience and. Something I hope every fan in the league at some point experiences. Because when you get to go out on the road like this and you get to see your team win a Grey Cup, it's such an unbelievable feeling.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that story. Okay, we're going to jump ahead a little bit
Mhm.
here on the end of our podcast today, and we're going to talk about some of these free agents that we have. Are we going to be able to sign? Is there anyone that you see us not signing? I think there's seven of them that are pretty substantial players.
Yeah, so I have a sheet of the depth charts out right now and some of the pending free agents. And yeah, it's really tricky. Obviously, every year there's teams with a lot of players going to free agency. Toronto's actually in a better spot than they've been in past years. They actually have the second least um fewest number of players on free agency after Hamilton. So they have surprisingly more guys than you'd think. But the problem is there's a lot of guys that are starters, particularly on the defensive side on the ball. Offensively, I'll cover them first because there's not that many. Both backup quarterbacks, Nick Arbuckle, Cameron Dukes, running back Kadeem Carey, wide receiver DeMonte Coxey, and Janarian Grant. They're all pending free agents. They have a couple of linemen as well, but most of their core guys are still there. but the defensive side is where they're taking a lot of licks. The three of the four starting defensive linemen, Jared Brinkman, Jake Ceresna, and Robbie Smith, are all pending free agents. Linebackers Wynton McManis and Fraser Sopik are potentially out. And then they have a whole whack of defensive backs: Tunde Adeleke, Deshaun Amos, Tavares McFadden, Robert Priester, Royce Metier. And then to top it all off, their other pending free agent on special teams is global punter John Haggerty. So it's a pretty substantial list of guys. If I had to pick guys who I would definitely like to see return to the Argonauts next year, I think number one has to be Wynton McManis again, especially with the year he played. If he keeps playing the way he has, I don't see why you choose not to retain him at whatever cost. Looking at someone on the offensive side, I think it would be a toss-up between either Kadeem Carey or DeMonte Coxey. And then on special teams, I really like John Haggerty, and especially now that Edmonton's punter was released to give a tryout opportunity in the Denver Broncos. I really do think that John Haggerty is one of, if not the top two punters in the league. So I think there's a lot of value at with the rules of having a global player. You want one to be useful and damn good on the field, and John Haggerty is exactly that. He's an outstanding punter, and certainly someone I would consider that they look to keeping
And
next
he's
season.
from is he from Australia?
Oh, he might. He's an Australian
I
lad.
thought so. I'm pretty good. I did watch some games this year, thank God. But
Yeah, I've
yeah,
only seen a couple of games, so apologies for the accent, but yeah, I do find Aussie football to be really fascinating. So
yeah.
I definitely hope they retain him around next year.
Now, can we sign most of these guys, or is that just too impossible?
I hope so. I don't see nothing's necessarily out of the question. I think it ends up becoming it's that balancing game that every GM has to face this time of year, especially coming off a championship. You'd love to see the team retain as many guys as possible, and we saw that happen after the 2022 season. Like from 2022 to 2023, a lot of guys stuck around to try to redo the run, and that's what led to the 15-2 season. But then we saw a lot of players leave from 2023 to 24. So then this year, obviously, you're hoping a lot of these guys from 24 want to run it back now in 25. But at the same point, everybody's value goes up because they think, oh, I won a championship. I was a key reason to why they won, so I want more money. And it comes as just a fact of the game that you're not going to be able to retain everybody. So now it comes to looking at what other teams have on the table, guys you might be able to pick up that can maybe fill holes in the roster, pending that you might be losing other guys. So like, I don't think they're going to be able to keep all three between Brinkman, Sresna, and Smith. So you probably have to put your chips into one, maybe two of them, and try to bring someone else from another team.
Do you have faith in our management to do just that?
Oh, I believe so. Pinball has done a fantastic job. So has Vince Magri, who's now left to be chief scout for the Buffalo Bills. John Murphy, I believe, is leaving to be with Calgary, but I'm not 100%. There'll be new individuals in those kind of scouting roles, but it's always a never-changing game. Just like the roster out on the field, there's going to be new guys coming in to scout next level talent. And you can always find guys in other spots
Yeah,
across the league.
yeah,
Like I'm just spying on the list of some of the guys on other teams right now. There's guys like in Edmonton who played for the Argos not that long ago who could be good ads if let's say Kadeem Carey can't stick around. They could maybe make a play on someone else like William Stanback maybe from BC or I don't know, somebody like that. They
yeah.
could get like someone like Lorenzo Malden maybe from Ottawa as a new defensive lineman. So, there's always opportunity to sign guys, and especially, and that's one of the good things when although you lose players who are on your team from winning a Grey Cup, you now prove a draw to guys who want to be part of a winning team, guys from teams that haven't had much success the last couple of years, Calgary, Edmonton, for instance.
And what were you? This is my last question, by the way. Were you at the victory parade?
Unfortunately, I was not. So, story about that. I took the red eye home on Monday night. So I left at about 10:30 Pacific time. So it was about 1 o'clock, 1:30 Eastern, and flew into Toronto, landed at about 7 o'clock, and I clocked in for work at 7:30 that morning. So yeah, I unfortunately was not able to get more time off work than that I had hoped to be able to go to that. But hopefully when we win in 2025, we'll all be able to make it out to that and really
Yeah,
get to celebrate because there's
yeah,
definitely a bit of despite being at the Grey Cup, there's definitely a lot of FOMO in the celebrations after when everybody was at Real Sports bar with all the players in the Grey Cup and that. Definitely wish I could have been there. So I'm hoping there'll be some more opportunities to come over the winter season and bring a little bit of warmth in Toronto during this cold winter.
yeah. Thank you very much. My name's Ken, and we're here on Ken's Corner with Nick Smalls doing our Argos 2024 season recap and Grey Cup champions. What a blast it was! So much fun. Thank you so much for coming on and joining me here today, Nick.
Always a pleasure, Ken. And one thing I just got to say too, as well, before we go off, I must say Vancouver did a fantastic job hosting this event. They're a world-class city. I can't say enough good things about them. The one thing I'll go on a tangent on, I'm a historian first and foremost, and of all the things that encapsulated me, other than the football game, was the library that they have there. If you get a chance, go see the Vancouver Public Library and keep reading books out there, everybody.
Yeah, you're right. That's amazing. I love Vancouver as well. Real quick, where is the Grey Cup in 2025?
So next year, the Grey Cup is in Winnipeg. So
That's
they
good.
will have a very encouraging off season because they definitely want to make it six straight if it's going to be at home.
Yeah, we'll be there. I'm not so sure Winnipeg will. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Nick. You have a great day. Again,
You
my
too,
name's
Ken.
yeah, we'll see you soon. My name's Cam. We're here on Ken's Corner with Nick Smalls. Thank you very much.